A dark, imposing figure filled the frame, their sharp teeth gleaming menacingly from the shadows. Their eye, a single point of intense white light, stared out with a silent, heavy presence. Their narrowed gaze conveyed a clear skepticism as they questioned the terms presented. A thoughtful and punctuated their expression, hinting at an unimpressed assessment of the situation. With a challenging smirk and a theatrical lean, they scoffed at the idea of arriving unprepared for a deal, reminding their counterpart of Hell's cutthroat nature. Their gaze then sharpened, teeth bared in indignant defiance as they declared themselves no fool, prompting an immediate demand to see the goods. The rhythmic clicks around them brought a weary, downcast look to their eyes, anticipating the inevitable. With a frustrated sigh, they found themselves completely surrounded by menacing figures, weapons now pointed directly after the terms were laid out. After their defiant remarks, their gaze softened and drifted downward, head tilted in quiet contemplation. A flicker of self-doubt crossed their face as they wondered if they were perhaps projecting an entirely different, unintended impression. With a wide, fanged grin, their eyes narrowed mischievously as the chilling proposition was made. Despite the grim exchange suggested, they playfully accepted the deal, hinting at a deeper game at play. With a puzzled, almost mocking glare, one figure questioned the strange language spoken, only for another to respond with a grim promise of a more understandable tongue. True to their word, a wide, manic grin exploded across their face as they conjured weapons, delivering their message in a deafening barrage of gunfire. Exhaling a deliberate foo with eyes closed, they focused intently on the glowing device in their grip. A plume of smoke billowed from it, a clear sign of their action before the object settled, now inert, nearby. With a predatory smirk, one figure leaned over the fallen individual, tauntingly asking if they intended to finish their word. As a sharp click echoed and the seated figure's eyes widened in intense shock, their gaze was suddenly filled with dawning terror. "You! God!" the white-haired figure grimaced, struggling against something unseen before a forceful bang erupted, sending blood spatters. As they recoiled with a quiet a car door opened, revealing a sinister, heart-covered figure whose malicious gaze fixed upon them from the glowing pink interior. The white-skinned figure recoiled, sharp lines radiating from their form as they demanded answers with wide, shocked eyes about what had just occurred. Across from them, the red figure maintained a poised posture, a lingering smirk playing on their lips as they provocatively asked for details, using a familiar, perhaps condescending, endearment. The heart-eyed figure laid down the law with saccharine words about boundaries, their menacing smile silencing the white-haired figure's attempts to explain their actions. Their initial protests were quickly overwhelmed by a terrifying shout and demand to stay in the studio, pressing the white-haired figure back in visible distress, before a final, chillingly sweet query left them quiet and defiant. The heart-eyed figure's voice, sweet with unspoken menace, outlined the extensive work needed to compensate for their absence. The white-skinned individual, jaw clenched and eyes narrowed in reluctant acceptance, offered a strained affirmation, their entire posture radiating a forced, uneasy compliance. The distressed figure tentatively offered to pull extra work, their attempt quickly shut down by the imposing figure in the car who coolly outlined their immediate, extensive penance. With a defeated gaze and a tightening of their features, the figure's forced smile conveyed a bitter acceptance of the menacing demands as they muttered their unwilling consent. Still fuming from the dismissal, the white-haired figure leaned back, exhaling a frustrated cloud of smoke while internally cursing the pompous shithead who'd just left. Beside them, the green figure stood with hands clasped nervously, their gaze reflecting quiet apprehension. The car's bright headlight sliced through the dim evening, a stark contrast that reflected the lingering sting of dismissal. With no words needed, the vehicle stood ready, promising a swift departure from the recent frustration. With eyes narrowed in stern dismissal, the white-haired figure leaned back in the car as someone tried to explain, their reflection showing a perplexed gaze. Stepping out soon after, they leaned against the vehicle with a cigarette, a cloud of smoke mirroring their exasperated sigh, completely oblivious to the hidden gaze observing from the shadows. A startled "oh" escaped them, their eyes squeezed shut in surprise, while the figure beside them gazed with wide-eyed shock. Yet, through it all, another offered a knowing, wide-mouthed "well hey there." As a suggestive "whoa now, for ladies I charge extra" left their lips, they held up a hand, prompting an immediate, wide-eyed denial from the figure leaning in, who only wanted to talk. Their eager request was met with a sharp, disgusted snarl and an emphatic no, as the shadow in the back sternly echoed the need for payment if time was to be wasted. Joyfully, one figure declared their readiness to assist, their hand extended with bright enthusiasm. However, a skeptical glance from their companion soon gave way to an indifferent shrug, prompting a third figure to angrily question the wisdom of engaging such a flippant individual, who simply asked about booze with their leg casually propped. With a leg provocatively raised and a cigarette casually held, one figure exuded a confident, knowing air. Another, eyes wide with bright enthusiasm, smiled warmly, convinced of the first skill, while their companion beside them watched with a deeply disapproving scowl. The first figure, reclining casually, stated they were on the clock before inquiring about the situation. Prompted by a stern companion's demand, they offered a flamboyant introduction, clearly irritating the companion who questioned its necessity. With a confident smirk, the figure brushed off the concern, subtly asserting their well-known status. As they calmly introduced themselves and their companion, their words were abruptly cut short. A jarring, crude question about the name Vaggie was loudly thrown their way, clearly catching them off guard. With a serious, slightly downward gaze, they declared they had a proposition. A firm resolve settled on their features, conveying the gravity and conviction behind their words. With wide, uncertain eyes, one figure absorbed the ongoing explanation as their companion watched with a skeptical gaze. An unsettlingly bright smile then spread across the first figure's face as they proposed the other become their first test subject, a notion that immediately sparked a sharp, angry protest and a furious demand to know why me. With an exasperated sigh, one figure explained the lack of progress after a day of talking, gently steadying their companion's distressed, tearful face. Watching their companion's visible upset, another figure across the room glared with an intense, almost fierce gaze, teeth bared. The offer of protection and a chance for reform was met with a dismissive sounds lame from one figure, eliciting cynical amusement from their companion. When another figure earnestly tried to question their enjoyment of their current lifestyle, they trailed off awkwardly, challenged by the first figure's narrowed gaze and sharp, insistent grin. A sharp, frustrated hey cut through the air, but one figure merely looked away with an exasperated sigh, clearly convinced the proposed candidate was entirely unsuitable. Their dismissive gaze and weary expression conveyed a profound doubt about the situation. One figure, exasperated, suggested they look again tomorrow, but a challenging gaze met another's defensive insistence on their worth. Then prove it, came the dare, which was met with a sudden, determined declaration of joining. The news sparked joyful shock in one, while the other's wide-eyed disbelief turned to disgust as the crude, practical motivations were candidly revealed. As one figure resignedly mentioned the need to work, a bundle of money was suddenly placed into their hands. Their gaze shifted to the unexpected gift, eyes wide with bewilderment, as a puzzled question formed on their lips, wondering what it was all for. With an intense, suspicious gaze and bared teeth, one figure immediately warned that this sudden offer was surely a trick. Meanwhile, another figure, beaming with a hopeful smile, voiced the possibility that someone was genuinely trying to help, while the third observed the exchange with a flat, unreadable expression. With a soft smile and a hand over their chest, one figure gently insisted this was an investment in the other, believing there was far more to them than they realized. The other's wide eyes betrayed a flicker of surprise and vulnerability before they quickly forced a dismissive grin, looking away as they mumbled about not needing any help. With a knowing glint in their eyes, one figure offered a casual "we'll be in touch," a hint of something more lingering in their expression. The other, shoulders slightly hunched, slowly assented with a wary okay, their gaze still wide with apprehension. As the figure in the red coat offered a polite yes and thank you, the other individual exited the vehicle, responding with a hesitant thanks. The limousine then pulled away with a casual sure, leaving the pink-striped figure alone on the sidewalk, clutching the received money. They watched the vehicle recede into the distance, a hand rising to their head in a gesture reflecting a mix of contemplation and subtle weariness. With a hand settled on their hip, a soft hum escaped them, reflecting the thoughtful expression unseen. Their long legs carried them with purpose, from the quiet indoors and past stacked shelves, eventually out into the vibrant, red glow of the city streets, clearly deep in contemplation. With a hand still resting thoughtfully on their hip, the individual in pink turned their gaze towards the dramatic scene unfolding before them. A fiery skull and an open-mouthed creature appeared agitated, yet their own eyes held a steady, knowing depth. Gently cradling the small piglet, their gaze held a soft, reflective tenderness as they quietly mused over its endearing presence. A gentle, knowing question lingered in the air, shared between them in the quiet comfort.